ladders, which I think is an apt way of putting it. And yet, as a former UN official, and this is where the sort of Mani Shankar Iyer advice comes back to me, I know it's not enough to simply give up trying. It's never wise, of course, to indulge in hypotheticals, but pragmatism does demand that we ask, how do we navigate this terrain? How do we create even a narrow opening for something of a serious thaw? Even if we were to go back to the brief periods of tranquility we've had, 2003 to 7, but earlier there were other windows when we had pretty decent relations with Pakistan. I would even say the Zia years up to his assassination weren't that bad in terms of our relations. We were playing cricket with each other regularly, we were visiting each other, and so on and so forth. What I would congratulate Surendra Kumar for is that this book does succeed in asking that question of the contributors, and it brings various perspectives together on what can and must be done to move the relationship forward, if at all possible. And I should stress that India has never said we are not open to normalizing relations with Pakistan. We have merely said that given the record of Pakistani behavior, the onus is on them. They are the ones who have to take the first steps to show some sincerity about dismantling the terror infrastructure on their lands. Why can't they be serious about shutting down these terror camps? Everyone knows where they are. The UN's committee has a list of 52 names of individuals, organizations, and places in Pakistan. It's not that Pakistan doesn't know they exist, nor their sponsors. Shut them down, arrest some of these characters, show some serious intent, and I think India will be only too happy to reciprocate. But in the absence of anything other than words, how do we take those words seriously when those words have been betrayed time and time again? And when even sincere voices, I mean, I have no doubt that the Zardari government was sincere about peace when they were in power before 2008 and right up to November 26, 2008, they were sincere. But the fact is, they are then either unable or unwilling to prevent the malign men who may order these terrorists to come from getting away with it. So unless some gestures are made from there, I have to say that words alone are not going to be enough from Pakistan, and that since terrorists continue to thrive in Pakistan, where they've been incubated and with no punitive measures having been taken, even when complicity has been established, I have to say that there is understandable reluctance, I think, in the government and in the foreign policy establishment generally, and many of these gentlemen here are members, good sort of card-carrying members of the foreign policy establishment. I think it would be difficult for them to stand up or sit in a meeting and advocate that we make the first gesture. We won't. And I think that's very clear that politically, the appetite for making that first gesture, I was looking at Surendra Kumar's chapter with those almost fantastical recommendations. Lend Pakistan $3 to $4 billion. So Surendra, I'm sorry, Surendra.
I said after 10 years.
We will have to see. We will have to see Pakistan do something serious to convey intent before we can start reciprocating, though I'm convinced we will reciprocate. In fact, when I chaired the External Affairs Committee the first time, we published a report 7 years ago, which is on the Lok Sabha website as a matter of record, advocating that we resume people-to-people relations, even while the government had taken, after the Pathankot and Uri episodes, they had said they would not have any relations, any dialogue with the government. We said, yes, even though don't talk to the government, but at least liberalize visas for people, because all Pakistanis who come to India end up loving the place and become voices for peace in Pakistan. Easing visa restrictions, welcoming Pakistani authors, athletes, artisans, whatever. I don't think now the appetite for that is going to be there just yet. We need something, some small gestures from Pakistan and we will reciprocate in kind. I mean, I I'm proud to say in front of Mani that back in 2009, when I was MOS and MEA, I was invited to deliver the Lal Bahadur Shastri lecture, and I made the lecture an eloquent argument for asymmetrical generosity by India to its neighbors on the subcontinent. I pointed out that, whenever we sit around with our SAARC neighbors, we account for 70% of the population, 80% of the GDP. We displace a certain amount of weight. We should not be surprised by the resentment of our smaller neighbors. I was often reminded of the wonderful line by the president of Mexico in 1910, Porfirio Diaz, who said, "My poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States." I mean, I think it's very similar feelings must be there amongst many of our neighbors about us, that they are too close to this huge behemoth around them. And therefore, I argued the case that we should, and I found a quotation from Guru Nanak to bolster my argument, that we should be asymmetrical in our gesture. And I'm convinced that if Pakistan shows any serious intent, we will be we will be more than equally generous in our response. But for any of the contributors to this volume to expect India now to make the first gesture is completely living in La La Land. It's not going to happen. And certainly with the present regime, with with Field Marshal, I keep forgetting his promotion, Munir, and the language he has used, the extraordinary bigotry, can you imagine, of addressing a Pakistani diaspora audience and advancing the proposition that Muslims cannot live in a non-Muslim majority country? I mean, it boggles the mind. I mean, did he have no sense of irony as to who he was talking to and where? These are Pakistanis living in America. And he says Muslims cannot live in a non-Muslim majority country. This fellow, as long as he is ruling the roost in Pakistan, I have very, very few expectations of any serious gesture from Pakistan. So there are all these other things that have been suggested in various parts of the book. Case for mutual economic prosperity, revitalization of SAARC, realization of a South Asian free trade area, etc., etc. I just think that that isn't going to happen quite that easily. So let me try and close. I think I've used up my 15 minutes by reminding us that yes, India and Pakistan are bound more closely by history, culture, and kinship than almost any other two nations. That depth of connection makes the pursuit of peace in some ways indispensable whenever it is possible. But Surendra Kumar reminds us in his chapter that France and the UK were able to build close partnerships with Germany after the two world wars and centuries of conflict before. The US has made peace with Vietnam, and indeed has very good relations with Vietnam today, and that therefore normalization between India and Pakistan ought to be possible. I certainly hope it will be quicker than what the late Stephen Cohen, the Dean of the South Asian Studies in the US, said. He argued that the two countries might reconcile after shooting at each other for 100 years. 100 years is longer than any of us in this room, with the exception of our Foreign Secretary Rasgotra, can ever expect to be around. So I think we should hope that he was wrong. But history is replete with examples of implacable foes who found peace and worked together for a brighter future. So I don't want to completely abandon Mani to stand by himself in advocating peace, because I think there is at least a notional possibility of that if circumstances come, if an enabling environment were built, and if we are able to remind ourselves of the bonds that run deeper than politics. I can tell you anecdotally, when I was at the UN in the peacekeeping department in the mid-1990s, which was, after some years of terrorism in Kashmir and so on, we had an Indian major and a Pakistani brigadier serving in our military advisor's office. Neither was the military advisor. That was a Canadian general, but we had both of them there. And these two chaps had lunch together every single day. They were practically inseparable. They could, as they fully realized, they've been shooting at each other across the border a few years earlier or a few years later. Who knows, maybe they did it in Kargil, I have no idea. But they had Punjabi in common. The major was a Sardarji. The brigadier was a Punjabi from Pakistan. And they had all the other bonds of taste for cuisine, of language, of culture, of music, etc., that made it so easy for them to maintain that relationship. And we mustn't forget that. And that is a case that we should definitely hope for. I don't know, because I haven't been to Pakistan for many years, what the younger generation of Pakistanis feels like in Pakistan, but certainly I can vouch for the diaspora, because I sat, for example, in the stands during the World Cup match between India and Pakistan in England in 2019. And there were young Pakistanis around me. There was a young Pakistani movie star, in fact, sitting next to me. There were Indians as well. And right behind me was a diaspora couple. The husband was Indian, the wife was Pakistani, and they were holding the other country's flags. Each of them were holding the opposite country's flags and supporting both teams. It is not impossible. You see it in Dubai all the time. You see it amongst UN colleagues, as I said. So it is not impossible. And I'm reminded of Dr. Manmohan Singh's dream of a day when one day we can have breakfast in Amritsar, lunch in Lahore, and dinner in Kabul. And who knows, perhaps one day we might find Mr. Trump's great surprise, to his great surprise, that we may not be buying oil from Pakistan, that he hasn't yet failed to find out in Pakistan. But Pakistan may well be buying, what shall I say, Indian cars and saris one day in the new South Asian free trade area. Who knows? Anything would be possible. But I think for now, the onus is on those guys to make the first gesture. Thank you for this excellent effort. Start working on the next edition. Thank you very much, Ambassador Skotra, Ambassador Surendra Kumar, my dear friends on the dais, the distinguished contributors to this book, and I see a couple in the audience as well. Members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to all of you. It's really a privilege to release this important volume. With India-Pakistan relations today, can they ever be good neighbors? Surendra Kumar has been quite prolific since leaving the service and has produced a large number of books on a variety of subjects, many of which I've read and some of which I've released. So I'm delighted to oblige him today, and my congratulations to Har Anand for bringing this out at this very important time. Original contributions from 14 distinguished voices, from the armed forces, from the intelligence community, from the foreign service, of course, and indeed from the worlds of academia and journalism, some of whom we've had the pleasure of hearing this evening. In some ways, the timing of the launch could not be more appropriate, because just 4 days ago, we marked our Independence Day, a reminder that from the very first day of our freedom, when our nation was also torn in two, a birth, as I've once written, that was also an abortion. The question of whether India and Pakistan could ever be good neighbors has lingered over us since that very day. In 2025, it remains as relevant as ever in the wake of the devastating Pahalgam massacre and the brief but consequential 88-hour conflict that followed as Operation Sindoor. So in some ways you could say, and I think Sharat, has already pointed this out, the book, in some ways the timing is a little off, because we may already be in need of a second edition, Surendra, just as we have launched the first. But no doubt the publishers will oblige as you update that. But it takes nothing away from the book itself, which compels us to grasp the very crux of the issue through a range of perspectives. And I think it does help us in many ways, from many angles, to understand India-Pakistan relations, where they have been, where they stand today, where they might yet go. It is without doubt an extremely insightful and important set of contributions. Now, my good friend Kamal Sibal asked why, after all, are India-Pakistan relations important at all? And I think the answer, from my view, is that if we accept that the overwhelming priority, our overwhelming objective as a nation, is the growth, development, and prosperity of our own people, then peace and tranquility on our borders is indispensable to our national interests. If for no other reason than that investors don't like war zones and we don't need the distractions. India today stands at the threshold of immense possibility. We aspire to emerge as a developed country by 2047, a leading power in a multipolar world, one where we can grow unimpeded, define our own spheres of influence, and set the terms of our engagements. In doing so, we aim even to help shape the future geopolitical global order, while serving as the voice of the global South and ensuring that the priorities of developing nations are represented at the world's high tables. Yet these aspirations will ring hollow if we are constantly being pricked by needles from across the border and we're unable to sustain stable relations in our own neighborhood. So in this context, Pakistan is our most persistent foreign policy challenge and I think arguably perhaps our most pressing national security concern. But we have a problem on the other side, which is that while there are objective reasons why peace is in our interest, and my good friend Mani Shankaraya sitting in the front row has been the most eloquent advocate of it, the problem is that sentiment is very minimally reciprocated on the other side. My own journey from Mani's camp to Kamal's, if you like, or to something close to that side, has been actually a very reactive one. Watching Pakistan, of which I had a much more positive view when I was at the UN, working with Pakistani officials, when I visited Pakistan as a UN official and was received with the kind of hospitality for which they're famous. And I thought there was tremendous possibility for peaceful relations. And then we saw it happening, unraveling over in a very systematic fashion, entirely because of Pakistan. 2003 to 7, more or less, was a period of complete bonhomie and good relations in every conceivable way. I have not even gone back to the earlier history, which is adequately covered in the book. Then 2008, my friend Shah Mahmood Qureshi was in Delhi to actually sign a liberalized visa agreement that day when 26/11 happened. And the horrors of it and the 166 deaths on our soil of our own citizens, of all faiths I might add, was a chilling reminder of what Pakistan was capable of wreaking on our soil. And then, of course, our government took the very mature and responsible decision not to retaliate, to find instead a method combining diplomatic pressure with the support of allies around the world. And allies is the wrong word, but partners around the world, or well-disposed countries with great influence in Pakistan around the world, to bring Pakistan to heel. We compiled an extensive dossier. We caught one of the terrorists alive. And not only our intelligence, but intelligence agencies from the Western world even recorded the chilling voice of that handler in Pakistan, giving minute-by-minute instructions to the killers in Mumbai. All that evidence, copiously collected, handed over to the Pakistanis. And to this day, no one has been prosecuted, let alone punished, by the Pakistanis for their participation there in this horrendous crime. Even the Americans managed to convict 2 conspirators, one of whom has now been extradited to us, but Pakistan has not. Pakistan, of course, exists only because of the pernicious two-nation theory, disproved, as many essayists in this book have pointed out, by the very birth of Bangladesh in 1971. M.J. Akbar's essay is eloquent on that subject. And as General Kapoor's essay observes, cast themselves as the defenders of Jammu and Kashmir, which as recently as this year, the so-called Field Marshal has described as Pakistan's jugular vein. These well-worn justifications have enabled the army to tighten its grip on power by portraying India as an existential threat. And this is where it became increasingly clear to me that there was something about the makeup of the Pakistani state that made the candlelight at Wagah flicker out rather than positively in my own heart. And that is the realization that, to paraphrase Voltaire on Prussia, that whereas in India the state has an army, in Pakistan the army has a state. And that because there is no army in the world, in any country in the world, that commands a larger share of their country's GDP or national budget, not just the defense budget, the overall government budget. No army in the world controls as much as Pakistan does. The army's vested interest in maintaining its dominance is colossal. as has been pointed out in Aisha Siddiqa's famous book, you don't join the army in Pakistan to defend the country, you join the army in Pakistan to run the country. And you're there even after retirement in a wide variety of businesses, import-export, petrol stations, real estate, you name it, universities, think tanks, academic institutions. To be in the army is to be in a position of privilege. I remember an Indian friend in the days of good relations with Pakistan visiting there, and his host happened to be somebody with an army background. Or his brother had an army background, I've forgotten the details. And this friend recounted how they went to a tourist site with an enormously long queue. And this friend of his was not even in uniform, just walked up to the head and said, "I'm from the army, 2 tickets please right now," and that was it. Off they went in, bypassing an hour-long queue. And that's simply the way the country is. It wouldn't work here, it does there. And so we have to confront the fact that every Indian-initiated effort at peace, from Nehru's pact with Liaquat Ali Khan in 1950 to Vajpayee's bus journey to Lahore in 1999, Modi's Lahore outreach in December 2015 when he went. I mean, it was an amazing story, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with, of how he was reminded by his foreign secretary when the delegation visiting Kabul was all sitting in their cars about to head to the airport, that he had to call Nawaz Sharif to wish him on his birthday. And so Modi makes the call, and Nawaz Sharif says to him, listen, you know, I'm on the way to Delhi. Why don't you stop and celebrate with me? It's also my granddaughter's wedding. And Modi, in an impulsive moment, says yes, at a time, as I think D.C. Raghavan knows well, that the High Commissioner in Islamabad didn't even have time to get to the airport to receive his Prime Minister. And off goes the Prime Minister of India to Lahore. An amazingly spontaneous gesture, a very wonderful day of bonhomie and affection and exchange of gifts and so on. And 3 weeks later, what do we get? We get a terrorist attack on Pathankot. And our Prime Minister is so disbelieving that this could be possible that he calls Nawaz Sharif and invites Pakistan to participate in the investigation into that terrorist attack, still assuming a level of good faith. And to the horror of the Indian intelligence community, the Pakistan intelligence sends people to look at an Indian airbase firsthand, and then they go back to Pakistan and announce, so the Indians did it to themselves. That, I think, was the last straw. That was the sense of betrayal there was so colossal. The old intent articulated by a Pakistani general to bleed India to death by 1,000 cuts was clearly manifest. And though indeed, as one of our speakers today, I've forgotten which one, so forgive me, pointed out, there were fleeting signs of progress and gestures such as the 2021 ceasefire. Was it you, Amitabh, who pointed that out at a time when we had awkward relations with China? And they renewed their commitment to the 2003 ceasefire, which had been actually perhaps the best one we'd had for quite some time. Even though they did that in 2021, a change of personnel at the top of the army is all it took for Pahalgam to happen on April 22, 2025. And so at the end of the day, I don't think India had very much choice in how to react about all this. In my book, Pax Indica, which was published in 2012, I had warned that if there was ever another Mumbai, another attack of comparable impact with clear evidence of Pakistani complicity, that the restraint we had shown in 2008 might be impossible and all bets would be off. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. I didn't feel that any democratic government, least of all India, with all the record of betrayals by Pakistan, one after the other, could sit idle while a neighbor assaults its civilians and innocent holidaymakers with impunity. And that's why that warning found its response in Operation Sindoor. And some of you may be aware that a couple of days after Pahalgam, I wrote an op-ed in the Indian Express advocating precisely this. The headline they gave, it was a good headline, was "Hit hard but hit smart." That is, hit hard because kinetic response was unavoidable. We simply could not afford to turn the other cheek. We cannot let them believe they can do this with impunity. At the same time, Don't forget that development is our larger goal. We can't afford this to be seen as the first salvo in a protracted war. Therefore, hit smart, precise, calibrated, targeted attacks. And you can imagine my satisfaction and semi-disbelief, because I didn't realize that anybody in Delhi would be reading my op-ed. Did exactly that. And Operation Sindoor a few weeks later followed, which is why I was such an enthusiastic supporter of it. It followed exactly the course of action I had advised in my op-ed just after Pahalgam. So, to my mind, with Balakot of 2019 and now Operation Sindoor, India has sent a very clear and unambiguous message that we would not hesitate to go to war if terrorism is unleashed in our soil in this manner. And I think the fact that we battered their defenses as much as we did, with the 11 air bases being struck, the significant demolition of facilities. There was a command and control center that was so badly damaged that subsequently it has been dismantled, as commercially available satellite pictures have demonstrated. And the devastating effect of the BrahMos was demonstrated as well. I think that we've now sent an unambiguous message. Now, I take the point of those who said today on stage that surely we don't believe that this is going to end terrorism from Pakistan. Of course we don't. The facilities we've destroyed can all be rebuilt within 6 to 9 months and probably will be. But the intent may have been shaken a little bit. And certainly the successful strikes of the night of 9th, 10th May, and the ability of India to intercept the attempted Pakistani response when they sent missiles to Delhi on the morning of the 10th, I think was what contributed undoubtedly, and not Mr. Trump, to the call by the Pakistani DGMO to his Indian counterpart asking for peace. Yes, General Munir or Field Marshal Munir has been rattling the nuclear saber thereafter. He has already announced in Washington that if Pakistan were attacked, they would take half the world with them. I am not particularly inclined to worry too much about this kind of bravado. And I think, as Major General Mehta put it aptly in the first chapter of this book, it's merely one more confirmation that India-Pakistan relations are all snakes and no ladders, which I think is an apt way of putting it. And yet, as a former UN official, and this is where the sort of Mani Shankar Iyer advice comes back to me, I know it's not enough to simply give up trying. It's never wise, of course, to indulge in hypotheticals, but pragmatism does demand that we ask, how do we navigate this terrain? How do we create even a narrow opening for something of a serious thaw? Even if we were to go back to the sort of the brief periods of tranquility we've had, 2003 to 7, but earlier there were other windows when we had pretty decent relations with Pakistan. I would even say the Zia years up to his assassination weren't that bad in terms of our relations. We were playing cricket with each other regularly, we were visiting each other, and so on and so forth. What I would congratulate Surendra Kumar for is that this book does succeed in asking that question of the contributors, and it brings various perspectives together on what can and must be done to move the relationship forward, if at all possible. And I should stress that India has never said we are not open to normalizing relations with Pakistan. We have merely said that given the record of Pakistani behavior, the onus is on them. They're the ones who have to take the first steps to show some sincerity about dismantling the terror infrastructure on their lands. Why can't they be serious about shutting down these terror camps? Everyone knows where they are. The UN committee has a list of 52 names of individuals, organizations, and places in Pakistan. It's not that Pakistan doesn't know they exist, nor their sponsors. Shut them down, arrest some of these characters, show some serious intent, and I think India will be only too happy to reciprocate. But in the absence of anything other than words, how do we take those words seriously when those words have been betrayed time and time again? And when even sincere voices, I mean, I have no doubt that the Zardari government was sincere about peace when they were in power before 2008 and right up to November 26, 2008, they were sincere. But the fact is, they are then either unable or unwilling to prevent the malign men who may order these terrorists to come from getting away with it. So unless some gestures are made from there, I have to say that words alone are not going to be enough from Pakistan, and that since terrorists continue to thrive in Pakistan, where they've been incubated and with no punitive measures having been taken, even when complicity has been established, I have to say that there is understandable reluctance, I think, in the government and in the foreign policy establishment generally, and many of these gentlemen here are members, good sort of card-carrying members of the foreign policy establishment. I think it will be difficult for them to stand up or sit in a meeting and advocate that we make the first gesture. We won't. And I think that's very clear that politically, the appetite for making that first gesture, I was looking at Surendra Kumar's chapter with those almost fantastical recommendations. Lend Pakistan $3 to $4 billion. So Surendra, I'm sorry, Surendra.
I said after 10 years.
We will have to see. We will have to see Pakistan do something serious to convey intent before we can start reciprocating, though I'm convinced we will reciprocate. In fact, when I chaired the External Affairs Committee the first time, we published a report 7 years ago, which is on the Lok Sabha website as a matter of record, advocating that we resume people-to-people relations, even while the government had taken, after the Pathankot and Uri episodes, they had said they would not have any relations, any dialogue with the government. We said, yes, even though don't talk to the government, but at least liberalize visas for people, because all Pakistanis who come to India end up loving the place and become voices for peace